Today's Sunday show is another one of my free events. And again, it's about someone who's beaten their cancer. And I'd like to introduce you today to Mark Gittens, who I first met about 5 years ago, and we're sort of slightly related. Mark had prostate cancer, and we'll get into talking about it. Anyway, good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. Very well, thank you.
Good, lovely. I like to hear people who are very well, especially after they've been patients of mine at some point. All right, let's start off. When did you first get your prostate cancer? When were you first diagnosed?
That was 6 years ago. It was March 2014, and it was the morning I was just about to fly out to on a holiday. I think it was in the Canaries somewhere. So not good news at the time.
Had you any symptoms?
I had zero symptoms. It turned out I had normal sized prostate when they checked it. Ultimately, I wasn't getting up for a pee in the night. I was just normal. Nothing that would have told me I had it.
And so they gave you what, a PSA test to start off with?
Long story short, I by then was doing Monday morning Tai Chi classes, and I've been doing it for a couple of years. And one morning I came in, and one of the ladies there handed me a sheet saying, free prostate check, PSA check for your prostate. And she shoved it under my nose. And I said, what's all this about? To be honest, Chris, I didn't even know what my prostate was, where it was, what it did. I didn't know what PSA was. I really had no idea, and that was the start actually of a long journey about finding out about my body anyway, which has proved very, very good in many ways. And I said, I'll do that some other time. She goes, no, you're coming up late 50s, nearly 60, you really ought to do it. And it turned out her husband had done it 10 years previously, which is quite early days then for a lot of treatment. And he had formed a charity on the south coast of England called Picasso, still active, which I'm an active member of now, and specifically for prostate men. And he voluntarily gave tests every month, often through rugby clubs or through other tests. But he wasn't a doctor, and they had rudimentary equipment which would test you up to a PSA of 20, which a lot of your readers will know what that is. And if you're more than that, they recommend you then basically to go for, see a proper doctor. So I went in all gay one morning, all happy before going to the airport, and came out and I was told it was 20 or above. And it was through them, to be honest. I think I'm still alive, to be honest, because it had been rampaging through my body. And it turned out ultimately I had a PSA of 120.
120, your PSA?
Yeah, it was quite a high one.
So did you then go and have the biopsy?
Yeah, that then kicked in through my normal doctor. At the time I was living near Tadworth in Epsom in England. So lucky I was under the Marsden, was my postcode domain. So then I went through just NHS treatment, checks, all the biopsies, everything else, which a lot of your viewers will know all about. Some parts pleasant, some parts unpleasant. And it confirmed it had spread outside. And I was basically told, no, well, there's not much really we can do. There's no point having it taken out because it's gone outside. And they then went through conventional treatment of, it was then the chemical Zoladex injections.
So you went,
3 months.
Let's get it straight. You went from a Monday morning where you were all relaxed and going to a Tai Chi class to a few weeks later when you actually were told you had 120 plus PSA and it spread outside your prostate.
Correct. Yeah.
So what were your thoughts at that point? It spread out outside my prostate. I'm with the Marsden. They're going to give me drugs. What were your thoughts, really?
Thoughts were two things. Number one, my older sister, 5 years older, had unfortunately been diagnosed 3 months before me with severe lung cancer and given predictably about a year or so to live, which unfortunately was all she achieved. So I was already in that mental state of, my God, there's this thing called cancer around, because I'd been helping Carol go to hyperbaric oxygen classes, which I think is one of your recommendations. And it was Carol who had been following some of your regime as well. So I was much aware of it, but it was a shock, out of the blue, suddenly, without even hitting retirement age, it's told you got, life-limiting fatal disease, basically. And mentally, I had to deal with it. And so chemically or medicinally rather, the Marsden recommended that I then go on a course treatment at the time for the injections into the stomach, doubled up with bicaltumide tablets, like a chemical castration, basically, to get rid of all the, I was about to say cholesterol, but the testosterone, and to reduce that, as they felt that was the active leader in the cancer. So they said, yeah, it was too late to have any other surgery done or removal. They did discuss with me the option then of radiotherapy under the Stampede trial, which had been, I think it's a global trial been running for a few years. But it was in its early days, and they said I was able to join the Stampede trial program if I wished. But if I joined it, there'd be a chance I'd be the one who wasn't receiving the actual chemicals, but still on the treatment program, or I could be. But I'd read a lot about radiotherapy by then, and I thought having by then discussed options with you and had a chat with you, I think we had about an hour's Skype together, and you kindly ran me through your regime and your thoughts and your program. I felt I and my body me and nature could do the job first. We'd give it our best shot first, and if need be somewhere down the line, I could then rely on things I didn't really want to entertain at that particular moment.
One of the things I always think about prostate cancer is this is a short summary of a long story, but there's a kind of equation which is estrogen plus testosterone equals DHT, and there are something like 14 drugs in Britain that all try to make the testosterone zero. So leaving, a multiple that whatever your estrogen is, times 0 equals 0. DHT is low, and that's what it's all about. It's hormone control rather than cure.
Yes.
And was that ever explained to you by the Marsden? You knew you were going to have hormones, but did they say basically we're just trying to extend your life, or did they actually say we can try and cure you or not? Did they
At that time, I had one daughter. I was running a very successful international design business, 30 of us, and I had a mortgage and a wife. And so I actually needed to know the parameters of what my cancer was and how it affected me. And I tried to get answers out of the Marsden on multiple occasions about my life expectancy. I needed to know. I deal with facts. And there was one, they were very reticent, but there was one lady I happened to see that pinned me down. And I said, look, but you've been here before. You must have had so many similar results. People my age, you've got a database. Give me a maximum and a minimum. And again, it took me a while, but eventually they turned around to say, well, with what you've got, we would think it could be down to 18 months, and it could be that maybe up to 5 years or more. But that was the regime time frame. And it was suddenly thinking, if I had 18 months, I've got a lot to do and organise and get sorted. But equally, it gave me the determination to do and follow, I'll be honest, your regime to the letter.
I remember the first thing you told me. The first thing you told me was they gave me 18 months. I think it must go through people's head that they're going to last the minimum of the times. I remember you telling me. Now, just say we ought to tell people we are sort of related because my daughter married your nephew. That's
correct. Yes.
That's how it all started. So we can blame them. And we had several chats at the RAC club because we lived near each other in Epsom.
We did.
But I would have started off by telling you about my triangle, my triangle that's, I believe, prostate cancer is all about, with diet, vigorous exercise, and fat control being the three corners of this triangle. So 100%. What did you do about those things?
Well, I started that night. I really did. To me, you were the you were the one person I had contact with that had great knowledge. I know you had helped one of your daughters through a very difficult time, tragic time early on, and you extended a lot of help. I knew you by then. I'd read about you and how you'd spent years on the research for cancer, and you're looking at necessarily unorthodox treatments, orthodox and unorthodox as well. And I had done some meditation many moons ago, so I was aware about outside energies and feelings. I'm not spiritual per se, and I certainly not don't attend church or anything really, apart from deaths and funerals and weddings. But you're the guru in my mind's eye. I'm not try to praise you up more, but you were the one source I felt I could attend to, as well as other reading that started from it.
Yeah.
So my mornings used to be, I mean, at the time I was a 100-hour-a-week businessman. You know, I was highly stressed. I'd be working, you know, on hardly have the odd Sunday off. You would take your work home. I think I recorded myself about 95 kilos then, which is 20 kilos overweight. My exercise regime had gone down to 0. I used to be an active cyclist and windsurfer, but that just went out the window. And yeah, I was fat and overweight and stressed and all the things that technically cancer don't help the regime of cancer. So I took your regime on board. My day used to start off with 2 big hot mugs of tea with 2 scoops of sugar in each, and toast and butter and jam and what have you. And that following morning, I'd already read about your regime about alkaline diets. So I started my day with a glass of hot lemon juice. You know, I think by then I'd bought some ginger. So I grated up ginger. I'd have a 1/2-inch cube of ginger chopped up into the lemon juice, bit of honey maybe, although that's right about the sugar. But I started it there and there.
And you got into the green tea?
Green tea. In fact, I'd go up to London and get to Chinatown, and we'd have a whole cupboard full of about 20 different types of green tea. Never knew they existed.
I remember you coming to the RAC club in the middle of the afternoon, and I was having a coffee. And I said, "Do you want a coffee?" You went, "No, I want a cup of green tea."
Yeah, well,
was absolutely rigorous on this.
I was.
So, all right. I mean, we'll come to the diet, but what about the exercise? Because I know you had windsurfed in the past, and you know, there was a threat at one point of you going kite surfing at the age of 61 or something, taking it up.
Well, in all seriousness, I'd been windsurfing for 30 odd years and quite proficient. I'd lived in Hawaii and places like that in my life for the windsurfing and the waves. It had eased off because of work, to be honest. And I had tried kite surfing, which was the new windsurfing around that time, about a year previously in Egypt for a long weekend. Didn't get on with it. And everybody said, "Mate, you're too old. You know, it's a young man's sport. You can't do it." And that weekend I got yanked all over the place. And I thought, sod this, it's now, you know, certain things I've got to realise I'm getting older. But part of the regime, and when I discuss things with you about meditation, a focus and having a goal, I visualised myself at the correct weight of how to lose 20 kilos. I knew I had to get fit. And I wanted something to pin it on that I loved as well. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to kite surf. I am actually going to learn to kite surf. So that year, with all the treatments I went on and the diets and the regime and the exercise, part of it was just learning to kite surf. And I went and took expert lessons. I think that year I went down to Dakhla in southern Morocco. Went out to Mauritius, we've been to Brazil, kite surfing, and now, yeah, I can go out in 35-mile-an-hour winds, quite proficient with our local group, and it's just the most amazing thing I've ever done, far better than any windsurfing.
I remember you saying to me, "Well, I live on Hayling Island and I'm going to kite surf off Hayling Island." And I used to fly over Hayling Island in my little light aircraft, the Isle of Wight. And I said I wouldn't do that because the Southampton sewers come out just in the English Channel. You're more likely to die if you fall in the water than you are of prostate cancer. I remember it very clearly. All right, so then you went onto the rainbow diet. So you did all the olive oils and the fish oils and the avocados and the nuts and seeds and all that sort of thing. What about fish and meat? Did you give up meat, or did you just cut back on it, or what did you do there?
I went out and got your 3 books immediately, the one on estrogen, rainbow diet, and everything to do to beat cancer. I got a number of other books and recommendations from our local prostate group, but I always defaulted to your books because I found them very clear to read. And if I wanted to drill down even to what happens at a cellular level in my body, I could do that. And that's how I learned even about turmeric and things. However, so coming back to, sorry, Chris, refresh me on your question again.
Well, a lot of people go vegan on me. And I always say, look, you know, I haven't got any research that if you go vegan on me, you'll live one day longer. And when it comes to prostate cancer, I do take people towards the vegetarian end, but I want you to eat fish. I want you to eat chicken, but not with the skin on it. There's very clear research that lots of prostate cancer patients are choline avid. So it's really, you've got to be careful of steaks, salamis, ham, chicken fat, eggs, and so on. So where did you go in the spectrum of vegan versus steak?
I didn't go vegan. What I did, though, was go organic where possible, because by then I've been reading about pesticides and what goes into food. I was an avid reader. I mean, I suddenly devoted hours every evening reading all sorts of books around the subject. And I realized there's two things, you know, you are what you eat, and you really are. So number one, we installed a very expensive osmotic water filter to cut out the estrogens. So at least I knew my body was getting clean water. Gave up alcohol overnight because that was excess sugars. So, and for 4 years I went without alcohol. I kept a diary, a simple diary of what I was and wasn't doing and when, as that helped my regime. We went from eating big fat steaks and mashed potato, loads of butter, to grilled fish. It was you recommending all the cruciferous vegetables. So I then even started growing all my own garlic and onions and broccoli, and started to actually love healthy living and eating. And then seeing the body transform by losing weight and getting fit, it spurs you on. You know, one starts a system and you start feeling better. And amongst my local community, they said, bloody hell, Mark, you're looking better than you ever have done. You know, you got cancer. You told me you might have 18 months to live. You're looking the healthiest of all of us now. And it was very inspirational to have that feedback. And I also helped many others as a result of what they saw I was doing, because they were getting various cancers as well. So in my local village of East Preston, I was lucky that I had a good community group amongst the kite surfers and windsurfers, but I was able to help many others with my strong belief in what we could do ourselves.
So let's be absolutely clear. So you did the vigorous exercise, you went on the right diet, you cut your fat to the point where you lost 20 kilos. One observation I would make, I literally, when I do PPs, I say, I'm going to give you a government health warning about Chris Woollams when it comes to prostate cancer. I can't agree with the doctors. Basically, I wouldn't cut my testosterone. What we know from the research, Australia and things like this, is that when you get a swollen prostate before you get prostate cancer, it's estrogen control. So in Australia, they've been using anti-estrogens, dutasteride and drugs like that. There's a guy in America called Charles Myers who's been beating prostate cancer. He uses dutasteride and anti-estrogen. There's also research, for example, that people who pump iron take lots of testosterone pills. You'd expect them, if it was all about testosterone, to get more prostate cancer. They get less. They get less. So I'm still, whatever my research, I'm actually telling you to do the opposite of what your doctor would have been telling you. He was saying, cut your testosterone. I was saying, Mark, cut your estrogen.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you think that was a risk, or did you think I knew what I was talking about?
I put my trust in you because you're a knowledgeable chap. But no, so pretty much all red meat went out the window, and I started to realize how they treated most cows now for mass farming and what went into all their foods, and how they're, you know, force fed, and therefore that's what the result of the milk and the cheese. So we now started eating goat's cheese, goat's milk, used cheese. We started switching to all the soya milks, nut milks, but organic ones where possible, and simplifying my life and basically cutting out all excess sugars. Processed foods went out the window, no sausages, salamis, all the things I used to love. And I didn't dither, you know, we'd go to the pub with my mates, we'd have a bike ride, they'd all be sinking the pints and the crisps and the chips like we used to. But I would just have hot water with a slice of lemon in a pub, which felt really weird at first. But over weeks and times, and everything started coming back, you feel better for it. And actually you realize you're in control of your body. You know, we get conditioned to eating what's in the supermarket and thinking if it's in the supermarket shelf, it must be okay. It's not, it's full of crap.
So what about the basic supplements? Did you do the vitamin D and the fish oils and things like that?
Vitamin D in the winter, as I realised that, you know, 10 minutes exposure to the sun in where we are on the south coast was sufficient. Fish oils, yes. And again, researched into the different types of fish oils.
Yeah,
because so many of them
what
aren't
about
that.
cutting the estrogen? What about things like melatonin or indole 3-carbon, or just you just eat lots of greens and broccoli?
Mainly lots of greens and broccoli, and I started taking the pommy tea tablets because that was the one supplement that seemed to have some scientific basis for use.
Yeah, well, that's Robert Thomas, Professor Robert Thomas, who's on our medical committee, and I actually, we had a chat, believe it or not, before he ever launched pommy tea, because he was going to put broccoli and tomatoes in it. He was at Addenbrooke's, and he was giving men broccoli, tomatoes and exercise and putting off the need for surgery by 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And then he had to do a clinical trial. The powers that be made him do a clinical trial. And we curcumin, pomegranate, resveratrol and things like this. Yeah. There's actually a new kid on the block. You may not know about this, but there was some research about 3 years ago on holy basil. And holy basil contains 3% acylic acid. And I've got a lot of patients in America now on neat acylic acid. But the other thing that contains 3% acylic acid is pistachio nuts, which are really good for men with prostate cancer.
Right. Didn't know that. I do take daily, as a friend of ours, I think it's in one of your books, recommended black cumin oil.
Yes.
So I have that big tablespoonful of that daily. I mix that up with organic turmeric, and I put in the black pepper, which is piperine, which I think you told me, because I now know that helps it penetrate the actual cellular wall. And so that also is a
black cumin seed oil, or black cumin seed, is an adaptogen. So if your testosterone is too low in us chaps as we get older, it puts it up a bit, really. Seriously. And it brings, if your estrogen, which we shouldn't have in our bodies, is too high, it brings it down. Now, the great thing about black cumin seed is the oil. You can take the pills, but if you still got a prostate, which you had, you can actually rub the oil between your anus and your scrotum, and it reduces the size of the prostate. It really, really works. So men don't have to get up for 3 wees in the night. Yeah. It's a hell of a difference.
I'll try that one on my wife and see if she buys that one. See if she buys that excuse.
So all right, so you got into meditation and stress management and things like this. Yeah.
We were lucky also that year coincided with my wife, who is quite spiritual. We happened to get offered a unique trip to accompany some shaman over to Peru. So we actually went in November. It was an English shaman who we knew. She'd been out there for 5 years and knew actual shaman amongst the Peruvian tribes up in the high mountains. So we actually almost went for a 2-week detox out there as well, with various ceremonies and the medicinal drugs and things they have out there. And that just helped focus my mind on the meditation side of seeing myself in the future clear. I actually saw myself walking my daughter down the aisle in, say, 15 years' time. I'd visualize things in the future. And that was part of this whole Bermuda Triangle, as you say, though, of a wholesome, dedicated attitude to getting myself better.
Yeah. Now, I remember you turning up at the RAC Club one afternoon to meet me. We met there a couple of times. And I remember describing you as dapper. You had obviously lost a lot of weight. And I said, you've made yourself into a dapper gentleman. You were really smartly dressed and much thinner and so on. And you'd actually come from a meeting at the Royal Marsden, where I think it was Professor Parker was actually saying to you things like, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Was that right?
Yeah, actually, I'd forgotten that. And he had, because the results, I was then going by then being monitored every 3 months. And I was charting my weight loss and charting the PSA drop. And although it dropped quite substantially first, they did say, Mr. Gittens, be careful, because sometimes if it drops quickly, it means it can also rise quickly. There's no guarantee, you know. But as it happened, mine fell like a stone and continued to plummet. And they really were. That was his exact words, to be honest. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know what the hell you're doing now, Mark, but whatever it is, keep it up.
Did he want to know?
Did what, sorry?
Did he want to know?
I had told them, you know, I mean, I had told them about the dietary and the exercise and the Tai Chi. It's probably, it's crossing professional boundaries. I think they are dedicated doctors within their field.
Yeah.
And because there's so many other variables when people mention other things, which they can't obviously test for amongst precise parameters, they can't obviously advocate too much.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, what's interesting to me about all this is I may have told you this. I had a patient, I cannot remember his name. It's probably better I don't. And he was actually a real Teletubby, and he got prostate cancer when he was 51, and by about 56 it had gone into his bones. And he'd heard of this guy called Charles Myers in America. And Charles Myers, cut long story short, was a very famous scientist, invented sort of 6 drugs for different things like AIDS and so on. And then Charles Myers went and got prostate cancer. But he beat his own prostate cancer using off-label drugs that were intended for other things, and then he used them against his prostate cancer. And cut a long story short, my patient got rid of his cancer, gone for six years, and then he got it again. And he came to me the second time round. And I think he went to Julian Kenyon in the Dove in the end. But when I asked him what Myers had done, Myers had said the same 2 things. It's all about fat control. And he gave him dutasteride to chop his estrogen back.
Right, yeah.
So it's not this lunatic Chris Woollams. There are other people doing it in the world going the opposite way. So I think it's really important. I think that with prostate cancer, you've absolutely got to cover all the bases. You've got to make sure your oxygen's high by doing the exercise. You've got to bring your fat down. You've got to meditate, pray, and so on. You've got to do the lot. Do you think that's right? Or
100%. The funny thing is, in our Picasso group, we want a sort of control committee for looking at diet, exercise. And one guy who's quite, he's been very, very helpful, put a lot of energy in. His doctors told him everything in moderation. So he's strongly advocating it is everything in moderation. He's quite very vociferous about it, and I've been equally vociferous, saying no, you want to do something, you've got to go the full beans, the full Monty. That's my opinion. But luckily here I am with my PSA 5 years on, still I think at 0.07, which is still incredibly low. I've been off any of the control drugs now for 2 years. I've got the type of drugs it was, the Zoladex and the other one. So they are expecting it to rise now, admittedly. But it is slightly rising, which is a result because of testosterone.
But they took you off the drugs, though, didn't they? I mean, I thought you went to see Parker again, and you came to me in the RAC club again and said, right, that's it, I'm off. I'm not on anything now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They think that after 3 years, once you've been on, I think it was the Zoladex and the bicaltimide about 3 years, there's a lot of evidence, I believe, that after a while, the cancer gets to sus that it's being zapped and it mutates. So often it can then carry on. So they tend to think that after about 3 years or so, that's the time really you ought to come off of it, and then you go back to being monitored. Luckily at that time, the Marsden had another idea, and they came to me, almost an independent trial. They said, Mark, what we think we'd like to do now, by now, your cancer should have spread to where it was and somewhere mid and somewhere up here. That's the norm by now after 3 or 4 years. So we're going to propose we give you radiotherapy to these 3 areas. Although we don't think they're there, they might be. There's the odd cell there. You've got 3 trillion cells in your body, any number could be cancerous. They said, we think you're fit enough to handle this triple dose of radiotherapy over 37 weeks. Would you consent? And I'd thought about it, and I'd got myself very fit by then, and healthy and physical wise. And I did. I went onto it, and they did say, look, we'll make it as a provision. If you start feeling sick or have diarrhea or have any side effects, we will stop immediately, and then we'll just carry on giving you radio to the normal area. However, and then if that's the case, we'll then give you a break for 8 weeks. We'll continue with the other areas. As it happened, I went through the lot, Chris. I did the whole full 37.
Oh, I remember again, it was the RAC club, because you came to me and you said they've come up with this plan that they want to give me one last splurge of radiotherapy everywhere, and then they'll sort of sign me off and let me go. And you asked me what I thought, and I was a bit cynical about it and sort of said, I think they're just trying to claim that they've done it all. But, my attitude was, if you could take it, take it. I mean, I'm not an alternative person. I build complementary and integrated programs. So my attitude, I build programs around the outside of the doctor's clever stuff, whether it's right or wrong, you know.
Yeah. And that's what I took, and I did, and I'm glad I did it. And yeah, touch wood, it's still 0.07 or so. I had mild diarrhea, I think, after about week 25 to 30. But again, I just did everything you said. And in fact, every morning, because I went back to living in Tadworth while I was having the treatments, I'd pretty much cycle down to Box Hill and up it. And that was before it. Then I'd be doing my Tai Chi in the waiting room even, just to get the energy flow going. And then it was my wife who, after the first session, I had the big machine come over me, and you get all the rumbling and the noise, and there's this thing whirring away. It was a bit off-putting, but Angie said that evening, she said, Mark, talk to the machine, make friends with it. She said, and actually help it, guide it down into zapping every one of those buggers that's in your body and call it your friend. And there's lots of this sort of different ways of thinking that when I went in there with the machine, I'd say, hello, machine, and I almost saw it, the elements coming down and kicking 10 barrels of shit out of the cancer cells. Yeah. It was like something like Lord of the Rings when they beat the orcs. Yeah. And I was visualizing all of that. And actually, like you make it fun. You make it enjoyable. You make it...
I mean, I agree with you. I also just comment for people listening to this. Robert Thomas also did us an article on cycling, because there's lots of people who question cycling because it causes inflammation down there and so on. But I agree with him. You know, the benefits far outweigh the any possible issue with inflammation. I think you know, it's good to get the exercise. If you can cycle up Box Hill, best of luck. You're going to get a lot of other benefits out of that. I think.
100%.
So, what would you say, looking back on it all? Do you feel it's now all gone?
Yes. Yeah, no, I've got to say yes. So my wife likes believing me. I'm aware that there's, out of 3 trillion cells plus in your body, who knows what's lurking in there. I also know all of us probably get or have cancerous cells, you know, several thousand a day, which your body naturally gets rid of anyway. Yeah. And the trick is making sure that your body stays healthy enough to deal with nature, how nature intends, that it can automatically detect and kill off the cancer cells. So I'm sure there are many rogue cells kicking around, but I'll continue to adopt a lifestyle that makes sure my body is doing the best it possibly can to deal with it naturally.
I've got a succession of people. I've got a couple of guys who are pretty well beaten it in America, and they do vigorous exercise. One guy, probably in the mid-70s, goes to the gym every day and pumps iron and does aerobics as well. And I've got a really interesting guy who's about 46, who had got it spread all over his body. And we've actually, by doing he's very keen on the gym, but by doing the exercise programs and the diet and everything else, it's all gone backwards. And now just got it in his prostate, and they're going to treat him. I mean, no one can believe it. I've never heard of it before, that the whole cancer would go down to such an extent. It's now contained again, so they can treat him.
Wonderful.
Which is unbelievable. So, all right, what's the 3 tips then, or 3 or 4 tips for anybody reading this, listening to this rather? What would
read your books, read the Rainbow Diet and How to Get Rid of Cancer. Seriously,
at the moment,
well, everything is in your books. Spend as much as you can on getting good produce, locally sourced produce in season, preferably organic, or grow your own. Whatever good goes in, it can only help, you know. It's simple. The exercise, half an hour of active exercise a day has to be. There's so much research has come out in the last 5 years about it. You're oxygenating your body. Cancer hates oxygenated areas, you know. So get yourself fit. It's not just about your lungs. It's about every cell in your body. And as it gets rid of all the lymph and moves it all around and keeps you fit. Having a positive belief, and having a vision and a focus, and set yourself a goal to do something. It's not a daily grind of going to the hospital. I mean, I know that does come into it at times. We all have to go through that, driving up the hospital, going to the car park, walking down in the waiting room. Have something outside that gives you a real buzz. I mean, I've started learning about electronic music production now. So I've got a room full of all my electronic music kit, and I'm learning electronic music production. And I didn't even know what the keys on the piano were, but A year on, I'm making my own tracks, loving it. So there's always things you can do and learn as life goes on.
I'm really pleased you talked to me today. I found it very, very interesting. I hope everybody else has done. You know, it's really nice to see you when I get back to Britain, COVID permitting. We'll have a glass of red wine together. Okay?
Yeah, lovely. Chris, really appreciate that. And thank you for all your help as well over the years.
My pleasure, Mark. My pleasure.
Wonderful.
Thank you for doing this today. All right. All the very best to you. Bye.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye. Bye.